Okay, as promised, let's get you more on this now. To discuss further, we now welcome political analyst Prof Bheki Mngomezulu, who joins us now. Prof, as always, it's great to chat to you. Welcome to the agenda this hour. So yesterday, we were told that it was not just about a January 8th statement, it was about renewal and introspection. What's your take?
Good morning, Putumko, and good morning to your viewers. Yes, indeed. Traditionally, the January 8th statement is supposed to achieve a couple of things. One is to reflect on how the party has performed in the previous year. And then second, it's to set the agenda for the current year. But the difference this time around is that what used to be contained in the January 8th statement will also find a pronouncement in the State of the Nation address, which will come next month. This time around, it's going to be slightly different in the sense that you no longer have the ANC running government alone. It is doing so as part of the multi-party coalition and not a GNU, as the president is saying and as everyone is saying. It's a multi-party coalition, not a government of national unity. But then, be that as it may, the reality, therefore, is that the president was then forced to reflect on how the parties performed last year. But what was disappointing for me was lack of humility. Under normal circumstances, when a party has performed so dismally in the manner the ANC has done in 2024, one would have expected the president to humble himself before the voters and then, of course, set the party on a new agenda. To say whether they like it or not, the ANC will continue to run government, that was, for me, misplaced.
And Prof, I want to pick up on that point as well, because I want to also stick to the theme of renewal. Do you get a sense that this was, a case of going back to the drawing board? Like you said right now, looking at how the party has performed in the Western Cape in the previous elections. I mean, the ANC NEC member, Stella Ndabeni, was also quoted as saying the people in Khayelitsha now regret not giving the ANC the nod. So would you say that introspection by the party has not happened the way it's supposed to?
Definitely not. Let's start with the Western Cape, where the January 8th statement was held. The ANC was once in control of the Western Cape. Relations between Mcebisi Skwatsha and Ibrahim Rasool and lack of leadership at a national level resulted in the ANC handing the Western Cape to the DA on a silver platter. The DA did not fight for the Western Cape. It was given to them by the ANC. Then the question is, from the time when the Western Cape fell in the hands of the DA, what has the ANC done to correct the situation? To come now, after the ANC has failed to perform well in many other parts of the country during the May 29 election last year, to then say that people of Khayelitsha, people of Gugulethu, people of Philippi regret that they didn't give the ANC a nod. This has been the case in the previous elections as well. And what has the party done today? So the renewal agenda is a correct approach. But of course, I don't think there is a political will to do so, simply because the ANC is still dealing with factional politics, which is what has brought the ANC to where it is right now. It's not the opposition, but it is the ANC itself with self-inflicted wounds.
And let's talk about the messaging itself, Prof, and how it was actually packaged and sold to the people. For example, some of the party's priorities and what they seek to address and what they speak to. Was this enough?
Structurally, the president's speech was correct. If I were to compare it, for example, with what happened with the EFF, which spoke for, where the leader spoke for 3 hours, 30 minutes. President Ramaphosa spoke for 2 hours, 20 minutes. But structurally, I think that Ramaphosa's speech was more structured than that of the EFF. But we're not talking about the EFF. I'm just bringing that for comparative purposes. Now, in terms of structuring the presentation, the president tried his level best to package it in such a manner that it will be easy to follow. He talked about the 4 objectives of the NDR. Of course, it's not something new because the NDR has been there even long before the ANC assumed office. Then he talked about the 6 priorities that the party is going to focus on. Interestingly, first on the list was the renewal of the ANC. You and I have heard about this for several times. But the reason why the party has not been able to renew itself is because of factionalism. Then he talked about focusing and fixing local government, which is a correct point to make, given the fact that this is the closest part of or level of government that is closest to the people. Then the question is, what has the party been doing all along? What has government been doing all along? Are we going to change things around now that we're in a multi-party government? So structurally, the speech was right, but then I don't think that the implementation part will follow, simply because in the past, that's exactly what has happened. The party has come up with clear policies. Government has come up with clear policies. Where the problem is on implementation.
And here's the thing, those are some of the sentiments that were shared by some of the people on the ground, as we heard some of our colleagues, speaking to some of the people that were in attendance there, Prof. And the party also called for what they called decisive action and rapid implementation of policy. And at the heart of it all are those hard issues that we talk about right now, hard issues that affect the people on the ground, whether someone will have a job, whether someone will have food to eat tomorrow. And those were some of, the sentiments that were coming, that continued to echo from the ground. Is this possible, or is the party just adding to their lengthy wish list?
That's a good question, Mko. The issue of addressing the economy is critical, because there is nothing else you can do unless you have the finances to make it happen. That is point number one. And then point number two, if you want to talk about a united ANC and therefore a government that is functional, you need people who are going to read from the same hymn book. Currently, this is not the case. If you talk about addressing corruption and crime, then of course you need people who are going to follow that up. Let me give you one example. You had a situation with the Phala matter, which basically is something that is not in line with the law. And then the president applies his mind to the issue and he realizes that there is nothing to defend here. This thing is terribly wrong. My image has been tarnished. The image of the party has been tarnished. The image of the country has been tarnished. The least I can do is to resign. And I commend the president for that. But what happened to those who surround him? They said, no, don't worry, Mr. President. We do have the numbers. We are going to defend you. And defend him they did. The question is, at what cost to the organization and at what cost to the country? Then you have a three-member panel led by former Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo, who made a recommendation that the president has a case to answer to. What did Parliament do? They said, no, we reject this outright. Not because it was wrong, but because they wanted to protect the president, not for his own sake, but for their own sake. So given that context then, you then wonder if what the president was saying will in fact be implemented. If the president talks about implementation being the focal point, are you going to be able to achieve that goal if the people you are working with have reduced themselves to being cheerleaders as opposed to being leaders of society? For me, those are critical questions.
And still on that point, Prof, I'm keen to find out that if we let history actually be a judge, having seen what happened with Nkandla, what is actually likely to happen just moving forward with this, as you make mention of what you termed as cheerleaders? Because I know the party has also spoke against what they called careerists. If you juxtapose the Nkandla saga and the Phala saga, you'll find very interesting things. With regards to the Nkandla saga, what happened is former President Jacob Zuma hired eminently as an architect to renew his homestead, which was fine because he was using his own finances. But because then President Zuma was a president, and therefore the security cluster had to go in there and then, of course, put in security features. That is where things went wrong. And then we have the likes of the current SG of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula, spilling the beans, as it were, saying that we advised that what was supposed to be a swimming pool, we changed it and then we called it a fire pool. But he didn't say it while former President Zuma was in office. He's saying it now that he's no longer in office and is no longer the leader of the ANC. Now, fast forward this to the Phala matter. Things went wrong, terribly wrong, which is why I said the president wanted to resign, correctly so. Now, the president is exiting the stage in 2027 as the president of the ANC, and is exiting the stage in 2029 as the president of the country. What will happen then? That is where your question comes in. Will history repeat itself?
Are we going to hear more of what happened behind the scenes in as far as the matter is concerned? Once the president is out of office, we can watch the space. But if you have an SG like Fikile Mbalula, I can assure you that chairs will start moving in a different direction.
Well, you say it's a case of musical chairs, and a term I wish to go back to now is the term of renewal, Prof. You know, we heard members, that members who do not really toe the line will find themselves out of the ANC. Possible or not, I mean, we've seen some leaders speak across each other. No one analyst described it as, in Zulu, what he called umdonsiswano, or pulling against one another. What's your take on that?
In principle, the president is right. All political parties have to be disciplined. So as a matter of principle, that is correct. But when it comes to implementing that decision, then that is something else. And the reason why it's very difficult to implement some of the decisions taken is because of factional politics. If you are in the correct, quote unquote, correct faction, it doesn't matter what you do, you will still go scot-free. And then if you are in the quote-unquote wrong faction, you will find yourself on the receiving end. And of course, this applies to the NEC, it applies to the National Working Committee, the NWC, it also applies to the Integrity Commission of the ANC. The question, at one point, in fact, I asked the question, does the Integrity Committee have integrity? I was asking that question basically in the context of factional politics. If the entire organization is factional, what will then basically keep the Integrity Commission free from that? In other words, can it be set aside and then you say, as far as the Integrity Commission is concerned, everything is going well, but in all other structures from NEC right down to the branch level, there is factional politics. I don't think that is possible. So therefore, for that reason, I don't think that what the good thing that the president was saying will in fact come to fruition for as long as factional politics is there. You and I can make the same mistake. One of us will be found guilty, the other one will go scot-free as a result of factional politics.
And Prof, I want us to also take a dive into what some of the partners of the party have been saying. I mean, the impasse with the SACP is on stalemate status as it is right now. Are we likely to see proper progress on this front, whether it be maybe discussions or definite severed ties?
No, the SACP has been making this statement several times, so we cannot take them seriously, honestly speaking. Because politics is a numbers game. The question we need to ask ourselves, does the SAP have numbers on its own? My answer is an emphatic no. So for that reason, then I don't think that the SACP will one day go it alone because they don't have the numbers. Until they mobilize more people to support the party, then only then can they do it. But for now, I don't see it happening. One thing that was telling for me was when Thulas Nnes was afforded an opportunity to give a message of support on behalf of the SACP. There are two things that impressed me. One, he said that the decision to go it alone in next year's election is not a solo pilot decision, but it's a collective decision. That was good because then it tells you that he knows how the alliance has been working. He also understands how the ANC has been working traditionally. There is this belief of collective responsibility. When they take decisions as a collective. Even in the ANC, they talk about democratic centralism. What that means is that you debate issues behind closed doors, but when you go out in the public, you present one voice. In the case of the SACP deliberated on the matter. They then decided that they are going to go it alone next year, like they did in some municipalities in 2016. But as to whether they will move completely out of the ANC, my answer is definitely no, they will not do that. That is why even in the language, you hear them complaining about certain things that the ANC is not doing well in its position as being leader of the alliance. But they are not necessarily prepared to sever our relations with the ANC completely. So it means, therefore, that in the expected meeting this year, in January, in fact, they are going to find each other and they are going to convince each other that, okay, it's fine, we can go it alone in 2026, like we did in 2016, but please remain in the alliance because the strength of the ANC is the alliance, which means we need SACP, we need COSATU, and at the time when there are so many political parties, the ANC definitely needs all members of the alliance, otherwise it will definitely find itself on the opposition benches.
All right, Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, thanks very much. Ever great chatting to you. Thank you very much for your insights on the program this morning.